words from Ms. Westbrooks just a moment ago, ESCA was called the No Child Left Behind Act, or NCLB. And so that spanned for a good 14 years, another name, but the same law regarding how we provide funding and education to our students. And then in 2015, more recently, Congress passed ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. So yet one more name for the same law, but the law does change. As the names change, it does have some differences between those laws, some enhancements that we are actually going to talk about today. That's not where it was supposed to go. Okay. Nothing like technology. Okay. So what's new in ESSA? What's new with this law that was passed in 2015 and what's new today? So ESSA really gives states and local governments more flexibility. But however, it requires that those state and local government leaders engage with their communities, called stakeholder engagement. So that's something that's really stressed in this ESSA plan today, stakeholder engagement. But it also tracks how students are doing academically. It looks at the gaps in performance among groups of students. It makes sure that those who need support receive it. Again, if we think about, go back to why this law was created, one of the reasons was to provide funding, especially for those students who have suffered from disadvantages, especially students in the low income or poverty really bracket. And what does a state ESSA plan include? Because every state has one, Georgia has one, and they all have to include these particular components though. So what do these plans include? Standards, which is really important. Have a plan that needs to include standards, especially when it comes to education for our students. But these standards are for what children should learn in each grade. It also includes assessments for finding out if the children have met those standards. So what children should be learning and if those children are actually learning. It includes long-term goals for schools and the students, so standards, assessments, and long-term goals, all good components of a plan. It also includes a way to measure those goals if the students and the schools are on track. But it also includes a system of supports for all the schools, especially those schools that are struggling the most. So once we've had our plan implemented, as with all things, there are organizations that review those plans and check and see how strong are those plans, where are the strengths, where are the weaknesses. And so we find an assessment of Georgia's plan with checkstateplans.org. And it outlines some of the strengths of Georgia's plan. And one of the things was that they determined that we had a really clear vision for school improvement in our ESSA plan, and that there was a significant emphasis on academic achievement and growth, and that we selected a straightforward set of indicators that focus on college and career readiness. So all good things. And that Georgia details a promising vision for tiered school supports and turnaround efforts for those schools that are struggling. However, they also noted some weaknesses in our plan, in our ESSA plan, that Georgia's accountability system does not convey the necessary sense of urgency to raise the achievement of the students who are the furthest behind. And that's something that we really need to make sure that the accountability system is always in alignment with the goals of the plan, the standards of the plan. We can have all of those wonderful things, but without accountability or without strong accountability, then we run the risk of not being able to measure the growth or to hold those who are responsible for educating our children accountable for meeting those goals. And the other thing that they noticed, one of the other weaknesses they noticed, was that the vast majority of a school's rating is based on overall results, which can mask, disparities in student outcomes, such as for subgroups, as they call subgroups, whether that's race and ethnicity, gender, free and reduced lunch, or low income or poverty related. So you can have a skewed rating by only basing the results on the overall population, rather than looking at those special subgroups of students who may be struggling. And a couple of other things that they noted about our ESSA plan was that Georgia's plan for identifying schools with low performing subgroups communicates lower expectations for historically underserved student groups. And that only makes it harder for those subgroups to actually move up into the learning level that they need. When you have lower expectations for children, then you're not expecting children to meet the standards that you've set. And when it comes to supporting struggling schools, Georgia's plan lacks details on how it intends to support these schools. Although that was one of the strengths, that it says we have a clear vision that we're going to support the schools, it lacks the details, according to checkstateplans.org, on how we intend to do that. So, nevertheless, what does ESSA still mean, though, for my school or for our schools? Again, ESSA is a plan that plans for school improvement. It is a plan that says how we will do better by our students. And every state must have a school improvement plan. And you should be able to find your school improvement plan on your school's website. If it is not posted, you can definitely request to see it or to have a copy of it. ESSA also provides for federal funds that will help, especially those students and those schools that are at the lowest performing levels, but also those students who are in poverty, are living at poverty level or at the low income level. And ESSA also means that there will be stakeholder engagement and education equity. That is one of the purposes for ESSA. And so stakeholder engagement, as we said, is quite important, and it's a requirement that all ESSA plans must include consultation with families and communities when they're designing their ESSA plans, so that all local education systems, the state education system, should have written in writing consultation with families and communities and how they will make that happen. And it should be designed, the ESSA plan should be designed to support education equity. Speaking of equity, we hear that word quite a bit, but what is equity? Equity means ensuring that students have access to the things they need in order to succeed. If you take a look at these three pictures on the screen, we see the words underneath them that define how the situation looks. So we see equality, we see equity, and we see justice. With equality, there's a brick wall in front of the three students. The three students are also at different heights. The brick wall is at the same level. But the three students there's the tallest of the three, and then there are two other students who can't quite see over the wall. The tallest student doesn't seem to be impeded by the wall's height, but the other two students certainly are. So while the wall is even, to represent the supports or services that are being provided, it's not enough for two of the students in order to give them an unobstructed view. If we look at equity, we see that there are some supports that have been provided to the students who are having trouble seeing over the wall. They can see the wall. They have a clear and unobstructed view with the supports that have been placed beneath them. One needs a box of, of a particular height, but the other student who is in the wheelchair not only needs a box of a particular height, but needs a ramp as well, so that she can actually go up to the height that she needs to see over the wall. And then there's justice, where there is no wall, and everyone has an unobstructed view, and everyone is treated with what is given what they need, and there are no barriers put in place. So that is the ultimate goal, where there are no barriers. Equity, however, is to ensure that all students receive the supports they need in order to succeed. So when we think about our school community, and when we think about ESSA being really, really strong on stakeholder engagement, such that it requires stakeholder engagement, then what then does our school community look like? Who's part of that school community? Who are those stakeholders? Who should our education community be engaging? So take a couple of seconds and think about that. Who do you think of when you think of the school community? Because ESSA requires that, hey, the schools need to reach out and engage stakeholders. Who are those stakeholders? Did you happen to think of students, parents, other families in the community, caregivers, whether that's a child caregiver or someone who's a caregiver of a student who may be disabled? Do we think of mentors or our peers or our students' peers or our business peers? Do we think of in-school staff? The in-school staff are also part of the school community. Do we think of health professionals, persons who can actually help students and families thrive? Youth program leaders in the community who are doing after-school programs or in-school programs. Community centers, places where our students can gather and our parents can gather, places where we can hold trainings and meetings about what's taking place in school. Local businesses. All of these are part of the school community. I mean, if we think about it beyond that, the broader community, we at the national, state, and local level, we think of, other agencies that are providing services for our children or providing services for parents. All of these persons, advocates, are part of the school community. So provided that all of those persons are part of and all of those entities are part of the school community, and ESSA requires engagement, let's talk a few minutes about ESSA and parent engagement. Let's bring it down from the broader spectrum of all of the stakeholders to just about parents. And so for parents, what does ESSA do? ESSA is a set of requirements that states, districts, and schools must follow in exchange for federal funding. That's pretty simple. Federal funding is tied to ESSA. So if you follow the instructions, you follow the requirements, the funding is available. But what is different? What does ESSA do that we haven't had before? So ESSA provides a little more flexibility than we had before. It provides the education system leaders, like our superintendents and our school principals, more flexibility on the condition that they engage with you, that they engage with the community, with families and communities when they make decisions, not after they make decisions, when they make decisions. And what can ESSA do for your child or student? As a parent who has a student in a public school system, what can ESSA do? So for all schools in all states, including Georgia. ESSA impacts how we improve schools. It goes back again to the school improvement factor. Each state has submitted an ESSA plan to the federal government, and we'll talk about ours a little bit, Georgia's a little bit more. And ESSA is just one tool, though, that we can use to make sure that children receive the resources they need. I mean, what other tools can you think of that children need because that can be a resource other than the ESSA plan? Just think on that for just a minute. Jot it down on a piece of paper or on your phone or whatever you're using, or your laptop, whatever you're using to view this training, and we'll come back to it. So what is school improvement? ESSA offers school improvement. So what is school improvement? School improvement is the process of learning about a school community and working to make it better. Simple definition. The process of learning about a school community and working to make it better. And so that doesn't say it's just the teachers. It doesn't say it's just the principal. It doesn't say it's just the parent, but that is for everyone. Everyone is engaged in school improvement. Because when district and school administrators engage with parents and families in this process, then we have stakeholder engagement. Then we have better opportunities for creating better plans that address the needs of the students within that school community. Then we're getting closer to equity because we are seeking out everyone as a part of the engagement process and planning process. How can you get involved in this process? How do we get involved with ESSA? How do we get involved with the planning, ESSA planning? And so again, under ESSA, parents and families must be involved in school improvement, regardless of whether you have ever been included before or in the past in meetings or community collaborations, regardless of your citizenship status, your language, your guardianship or ability, you have every right to be involved in making your schools better. Your school and your district leaders are required to make that possible. They're required to make the engagement possible because ESSA requires parent engagement. So how can you get involved? All families can affect what ESSA means for their students by being a part of the school improvement planning. And so here's some questions to get you started. When you're getting ready for that planning meeting, that engagement meeting, think about questions that you first reflect on, and then questions you can pose to your school leadership. Do you have a child who is struggling? And if that child is struggling, how? A child who is struggling within the education system. How is that? What are the impediments? What are the obstacles? Does your child have that unobstructed view that you need that child needs for equity and for learning? How can your school support your child or your children? Are there programs already in place to support all students? If not, what programs do you believe need to be in place? And if they are, how can you find out more about them? What communication is made available to parents, to communities about the programs that the school offers? Do you know who in your school community can help you advocate for your child? So start to think beyond yourself and say, well, who else might be having this issue? What other families might be going through what we're going through? Where are there resources or advocates who might understand what we're trying to accomplish at our school in making sure that our school improves in the way that it addresses our children's education? And so start to look outside of just your home, start to look outside of just your neighborhood, and start to seek support and resources at a broader spectrum. And then another question could be, what other parents and families and organizers want the same change? They may be going through the same thing, but they may not be open at this point to even understanding what kind of advocacy is needed. So you may need to approach them and say, as a group, we can ask for change. We can demand change. ESSA says we can. And then how can you work together? How can you all work together for the good of your children and for the good of their education? So those are just some questions to get you thinking and get you started. When you begin to get engaged with the preparations for ESSA at your local education agency, then you start to think about how can we make this process better and how can ESSA begin to speak to the needs that we have. So the Every Student Succeeds Act, another piece of it that we really need to know about, is included in the title funds. Now, title funds are not that exciting because it's a lot of legalese, but they are important. And so the first T in the titles, Title I, which is a major one that we are going to be paying attention to. There are others, as you can see on the screen, Title I through Title VIII, excuse me. But the one that we are most focused on today is Title I of ESSA. And it is the first major chapter of the law, which includes the bulk of funding for school districts and schools, which contains the majority of the laws of the ESSA's accountability and reporting requirements. Title I funding is targeted to serve low-income students in poverty who are at the poverty level. That I know we tend to say low income a lot because the word poverty doesn't seem to carry with it positive connotations. Neither there's low income, but we do need to call things what they are. It really is for students in poverty. And we do have too many children in our country and in our state who live at the poverty level. So, but there's also Title II of ESSA, and then that deals with teacher quality and support for teachers. Title III, which also has a funding component, but is for related to English learners. There's Title IV, and this chapter provides funding and requirements for other areas of student support, such as after-school programs. Title V of ESSA provides additional requirements and limitations on funding for rural schools as rules governing the combining of federal funding. Title VI deals with American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian students. Title VII also, again, all of these are about funding requirements for the most part. It deals with, compensates districts for lost revenue due to federal lands. And the reason that word is so small is that there was a word that was there that was the word review and not revenue. And then the last title is Title VIII. And this title deals with general requirements, which govern the law overall, and provisions that may be waived. And you've heard of schools, districts, school systems having waivers that are given by the Department of Education, and restrictions on the U.S. Secretary of Education's authority. But again, back to Title I, that is the one that we will be focusing on. And it is the first T of the title, Title I. And it is going to be the one that the ESSA funds are targeted to serve the low-income students in poverty in our school districts. The second T in our ESSA discussion when it comes to title funds is timelines. What happens when districts and schools all across the country apply to their states on an annual basis? Here in Georgia, usually over the summer, for their share of title funds under ESSA and for competitive ESSA funds. This is an important timeline because this is what we need to know in order to make sure that we are engaging our districts and our schools during this time, and that they are engaging us because they're applying for funding. That means planning is going on. And then districts and schools receive their Title I funds from states, from their states, their respective states, and then school improvement funds go to the schools. The state, which is the SEA, State Education Agency, releases applications that districts and schools, the local education agency, needs to fill out to get funding for school improvement. And so this whole process takes place usually without our knowledge. However, it does not mean that it should happen without our knowledge. We can be engaged. We can give feedback. Once they release their draft plans, there is a time for public comment. We should be giving comment on those ESSA plans when they are released for public comment to make sure that our needs, the students that we know of, our own students, other students, our community schools, understand that these are the needs that are in our community and that the ESSA plan reflects that. And then district budgets are also composed and compiled during this time. And we know that over this span of COVID-19 now going on for more than a year, that our district budgets have gone through a myriad of stops and starts in trying to ensure that funding is available in the right place. So you may want to take a look at your district school budget to get a better idea of how the funds have been allocated and where the funds have been allocated for the 2020-2021 school year. And you can contact your local school board to get a copy, of your district budget, or it should be actually posted on the website of the school board. Now, once you've gone through all of this, once we know what ESSA is about, we know that ESSA is about stakeholder engagement, we know that ESSA is about school improvement, we know that ESSA is about providing funding, especially for our struggling schools and for students who are living at the poverty level. We know that ESSA has requirements that schools and state agencies, state education agencies, and local education agencies must engage with the community. How then do we take action for school improvement? And so right now we're going to talk about that left-hand side of the screen. Can our districts and our schools who are responsible for carrying out, developing the ESSA plan, engaging with making sure the ESSA plan includes everyone, that it bears out equity for our students, how can then they take action for school improvement through these steps? So the first thing that they can do on the district level and at school level is to learn more about the community that they serve, to reach out beyond the walls of the schools and understand the community in which the schools sit. The districts and the schools can set goals that are informed, again, by that engagement, informed by what the community cares about. To not just go from what we did 10 years ago or what we did last year or what we did 3 years ago, but to continually engage the community to understand that the goals need to be in concert with the needs of the community and the cares of the community. The districts and schools should make a plan, right? ESSA is a plan, but within that ESSA plan, we need to create a plan based on community priorities to make sure that those community priorities are actually included in the ESSA plan. And then we need to write down the plan, write it down, be accountable to the plan, to hold itself accountable. Are we meeting the goals? Did we meet the community priorities? So write it down, make it plain, and one thing, don't hide it. Make sure it's available to the community. And then make it happen by working hard, by involving the community, by engaging the community, by not giving up. When you hold the first meeting and only five community members show up, it's a new step if you've never engaged the community before. So keep at it, don't give up. So for the local applications for ESSA funds, each summer, again, our LEAs SEAs apply for ESSA funds. The SEAs design the applications, that is the state level designs the applications, and they review and approve each local education agency's application, each school district's application. And so, for example, already Georgia has posted information for our local education agencies to file a consolidated improvement plan. And there's a link on the screen, and that will be dropped into the chat. And these LEAs, excuse me, must afford a reasonable opportunity for public comment. So that link, make sure you click on it and look at the timeline for this application. Because once they release the document for the plan for public comments, that's your time to respond to what our local education agencies have said they are going to do in order to meet the education needs of our students. So back to, here's what we can do to be involved. We can be involved in this particular aspect of our education system, and that is responding with public comment to the plans that they're about to release. So let's switch gears. Let's talk about the Cares Act and Essa. As we know, as you know, we are still in COVID. As you know, we've had funding, emergency funding released called the Cares Act. We've had a couple of those, and then we've had one more recent. But let's go back to last year for just a moment and talk about the Cares Act and Essa and how it impacted the funding that we received for our 2021 year. So what did Georgia receive? Georgia received $105,720,728 in what is called the Governor's Education Relief Fund. And then there was another set of funding that Georgia received, $457,169,852 in what is called the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. So that was what Georgia received last year. Out of the billions of dollars that were distributed across the country, Georgia received a good, nice sum of money. This money was given directly to the states, and it was to help schools respond to the coronavirus pandemic and school closures, the related school closures. We're not doing in-person learning, so the learning at home or remote learning to meet the immediate needs of the students and teachers, to improve the use of education technology for those who were without, Wi-Fi or, internet capability, to support distance education, and to make up for lost learning time. So that is all of that funding was to go for those things. So that was last year. And now, just recently, there was another funding mandate, that was given, again, from the US government. It's called the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. And everyone probably, if you turned on the TV or the radio at all, you heard about the American Rescue Plan Act, or you may have heard the amount, $1.9 trillion, more so than the name of the plan. And again, this was to respond to the health and economic disparities and the crisis that's still continuing because of the coronavirus or COVID-19 pandemic. And so out of that $1.9 trillion, $122 billion was given for education. And it's called the American Rescue Plan Act, Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief. That's a long title to say, here's money for education. and it's funding for pre-K through 12th grade. So what are some things, though, that we can do with that money, that our state can do with that money? And what are some things that our state cannot do with that money? Out of the ARP or the ARC or the ARPA plan, states cannot subgrant because this funding is coming in the form of block grants, cannot subgrant less than 90% of its total allocation. So therefore, you can't subgrant less than 90% of it. You have to use 90% of this to your education, to your schools, to your local education agencies, including charter schools that are LEAs or local education agencies. So 90% of that money has to go to the schools, to the education. And they must be allocated on the same basis that you're allocating your Title I Part A funds that you receive. And that again is about the children who are living at poverty level, living at low income / poverty level. We go back to that Title I of ESSA. It means that that funding has to go to those who are struggling the most. And some of the ways that those funds, much like the Cares Act, that they can be used to address the impacts of COVID for pre-K through 12th grade. We need to invest in resources to implement the CDC's in-person learning requirements. So you can use funds for that to make sure that you're operating in accordance with those guidelines. You can hire additional educators. You can avoid layoffs. You can implement programs and strategies and guides to meet the social, emotional, mental health, and academic needs of students who were the hardest hit by COVID-19. So you can actually target communities that were hardest hit and provide additional funding, which would then look more like equity. So looking at those communities that are hardest hit and providing the resources and services they need to those students. After school programs, you can have enrichment programs, you can do summer programs, extended learning programs. You can use those funds for all of those things that are going to be needed, that are needed already and are truly going to be needed for our students at this time due to the loss of learning. You can hire additional school personnel like nurses, even custodial staff. Staff that can help keep the schools safe and healthy so that you can meet the CDC guidelines, so that way that your students are safe, teachers are safe. I just was notified earlier before this training to this morning that a teacher who I know who's doing in-class teaching with her students and her entire family now, they just rushed her to the hospital. Her entire family has contracted COVID-19. So this funding is truly needed. I'm sure we all know someone, on a personal level who's been impacted by COVID-19. And so this funding to get nurses in schools, to get appropriate custodial staff in schools, to get appropriate health personnel in schools to help keep schools safe and healthy is critical. And so we can provide for the social distancing and safety protocols on buses. And we can also provide for, that technology that our students need, those without connectivity. In Georgia, we have huge swaths of the area that are not, broadband capable, who do not have children and families who do not have internet capability, who do not have ready access to hotspots and things that we kind of take for granted when you live in maybe a more urban area or a thriving suburban area. But everyone doesn't have what you may have. So we need to understand that at the local level, at the community level, that this funding is needed to do so many things that will make sure that our students are learning. One of the other things that this plan does and that the funding has been allocated for is that funding, of course, for children who are homeless, our children and youth who are homeless, who are absolutely in need of housing, in need of shelter, in need of a number of things, of safety. And so $800 million of this funding was set aside to identify children who are homeless, children and youth who are homeless, and provide them with the wraparound services that they need. And so that's a set aside of $800 million to support these children in particular. And the ARP plan also provides for instruction planning about how to return to in-person learning in a safe and healthy way. And that every school, once you return to in-person instruction, you have to post on the school's website that plan for making sure that students and staff and teachers and administrators are kept safe and healthy. You have to post that plan within 30 days of returning to in-person instruction. And also, you have to seek public comment on that plan so that then it's not just a plan done in a vacuum, but it is, again, the required engagement that ESSA requires, the engagement from the community. That plan has to be provided for public comment before it can be implemented. And so that's another area for you to seek out. If you are at a school system that says we are doing in-person instruction, or we're about to go back to in-person instruction, then seek out that school and ask for the plan. Where is the plan? What plan, where is your in-person safe return to in-person plan so that we can see how safe our school is going to be. And so when we look at the amount of funding that Georgia has applied for and has been allocated for Georgia, we see that Georgia has an allocation of $4,249,371,244. And our grant period is from March 11th through September 30th, 2023. And that is when all funds must be expended, by September 30th, 2023. But Georgia has an allocation of $2 billion. And so how has Georgia divvied up that funding? Because the total is the 4.2 billion. And so the 90% of that, as you can see, remember, go back to what the plan requires. What ARP requires is that 90% of it must go to the local education agencies, must be about the schools and the students, the teachers, the staff must be there for education. And then there's a 10% reservation piece that's after that 90%, that would be 90 plus 10 is 100. So there's roughly 425 million available at the state level for the state to take care of administrative processes and other administrative needs that the state may have in, for example, implementation for other administrative responsibilities that the state has for running the ARP, but also running the Department of Education. So we know that Georgia was allocated the roughly 4.2 billion. How do we handle that money? We know that ESSA requires and ARP requires that the money be distributed allocated to the LEAs, the local education agencies, in the same manner as Title I Part A funds are. For your edification, we have a link to the Title I handbook for Title I directors, because they actually have an entire handbook as to how that calculation is done and how that distribution is done, how allocations are determined. So we will not labor through that handbook at this training. But if you want to take a closer look at what Title I directors do, that link will take you to a handbook that's designed for them. We also have, if you'd like to know what these schools are, these Title I-A schools that we talk about, that we're talking about, that are those that are the target for this funding. There are other schools can be, of course, receive funding, but this Title I-A school list shows the schools that are targeted for this funding, the primary targets for this funding, I should say. And then also, we show on that third link the actual allocations per school system for this ARP funding. So there's an actual chart that shows every school system and how much funding within the Georgia's education school system is what we're talking about, how much funding each of those schools will receive. And so that third link is for that. And these links will be placed in the chat box so that you can click on them and take a look at them and keep them. You can also download that information for yourselves. So let's see. We wanted to show some of the school systems and some of the allocations. So we're going to see if we can't stop share and go to, I'm going to go back to the previous screen. We're going to show some of these school systems, hopefully, and see what exactly those allocations look like. And so these are just 5 that we chose, which of course, Macon-Bibb, Gwinnett, Appling County, Fulton County, and DeKalb. So let's see if we can take a look at those. And so hopefully this will come up shortly. Okay, so if you see at the top, the first one is Appling County School District. And Appling County School District was awarded $10,221,972 of the ARP funding. So that's what's been allocated for Appling County. When we scroll down and see Bibb County, we see Bibb County has an allocation of $100,300,137 for the ARP fund. And then we had Gwinnett County, and Gwinnett County has an allocation of $282 million, $282,404,800. Gwinnett County is our largest school district. Again, remember that we're talking about Title I Part A, which means that it's targeting school systems that have students who are at the low income and poverty level who should receive the bulk of the funds. And then we had, I think we had another one was Fulton County, which went out of order here. Fulton County. And Fulton County has an allocation of $168,838,062. And then DeKalb County has an allocation of $313,000 right here, $313,231,738. So all of this to say, this is not a small amount of money that's being allocated. And for education, we should be allocating, substantial funding to make sure that our children are receiving the education, the services, the resources they need, especially during this time of COVID. And so that we hopefully can mitigate some of the loss of learning. We know that it's going to take time, but this funding is definitely truly needed. So let's see if we can go back to our screen. I may have to stop share. I know sometimes it won't switch back and forth. So I'm going to stop share, come back to the PowerPoint, and then we will continue. Okay. Make sure we are sharing again. Go through that again. So now, how can we, on the parents and family side, the right-hand side, how can we take action for school improvement? We know that the districts must engage. We know that the schools must engage. We know that though it has to be a two-way relationship. If districts and schools are required to engage by ESSA, we need to reach back so that when there's outreach from the district, we need to be available to say, yes, we are ready to be engaged. We want to be engaged. And so how can we do that? So when the district comes or the school comes and they say, we're holding a meeting, or hopefully they're holding it within the community and not somewhere outside of the community. They say, we want to learn more about what your cares are, what is going on in your community. Share your story. Share your story, not only with the districts and the schools, but share your stories with other families and find that common ground. Find out, remember those questions that you could be asking, is my child the only one that's having these issues? Is my child the only one struggling? But share your stories with other families, share your story with the districts and the schools. And inform the goals. When the school says we're setting some goals, be there to inform the goals. What is your success for your child look like? And then what kind of school do you want for your child? Answer those questions first for yourself first, and then inform the goals that the school says that we have on our school improvement plan. Does that school improvement plan include your child? And then help set the priorities for student supports and programs. While the school and the districts are making a plan based on the community priorities that they say that they have received from the community, help set those priorities. It could be a list of 100 things. But what are the primary things that need to be done? What phase should we be in at this point? What are those phase 1 priorities? Phase 2 priorities, phase 3 priorities. Help to set those priorities that the district and the schools are developing. And then also help to write the plan down so that then you can hold the districts accountable, so that you can hold the school accountable for the school improvement plan. If you're not there, send a delegate. Yet, that's why you talk to each other. That's why families should be talking to each other. People work, you may be working late at night. Someone may be working, at a different hours of the day. When that meeting is being held, if you're not available to be there, send someone to write the plan down. And then make it, while we're telling the districts and the school to make it happen by working hard, we need to be over here doing the same thing. We need to be organizing, volunteering, and showing up. This is our community. This is your community. And you have every right to be involved. This is how we take action for school improvement. This is what it requires. And so think about these steps, and then let's get back to our schools. Let's get back to our students so that then they too can have the benefit of all the hard work that's gone in on both sides. That the relationship that's been developed between the districts and the communities are such that our children realize it in getting, in achieving great things. and having great possibilities. So during COVID-19, there's been a great deal of impact on our students. So back to when we're planning and creating plans for school improvement, thinking about what they have gone through right now, what students, parents, and teachers have gone through right now, how would we develop that plan? What are the needs that we would determine for that plan? So think about the critical needs for students, parents, and teachers in this environment of COVID-19 and what a school improvement plan would look like. And then think about what demand would you make to ensure that our students, our parents, our teachers, and our districts receive the help they need at this time. Money has been allocated. Money has been requested. The State Board of Education at its March 25th meeting approved the request for funds. So, instructing the state superintendent to request the funds. So money has been allocated. And within 60 days of receiving those funds must be distributed to our local education agencies. So start thinking about what are the needs that we have at this time, that our students, our parents, our teachers, and districts have at this time that they need in order to do the work that they are called to do. Teachers who are called to teach, who are called to educate our children. Districts, administrators who are called to make sure that the governance of our schools is such that our children are learning without impediment, and that they are being treated with respect, and that their potential is being realized, and that our parents are being recognized as the greatest teachers for our children, and that they are being supported in that effort. Those are questions that we should be thinking about at this time because of the impact of COVID-19, but also because now funding is being provided and plans are being developed. And what can we do to make sure that those plans speak to the needs of the community? I like the Avengers. I do. I'm, adventure crazy. Because it's soothing, to think that there are these, Avengers out there, these people with great abilities and special abilities who can come and right the wrongs, who can, although they are human, some of them are not, and they make mistakes and they really can tear up a city. But in the end, they get to the right place. And so when we think about COVID-19 and the impact on our students, you kind of think you want the Avengers to come in and get rid of all of the things that are creating learning loss and the lack of support services that we have. You want them to fill in, you want some Avengers to come in and fill in the gaps, because we do have a lack of support services without COVID-19. But we also, have the gaps of social interaction. Our children can't socialize the way they normally would. We can't socialize the way we normally would, which is why we're doing a virtual webinar, which is really hard because you can't see, you can't get that grasp of what people are thinking because you can't see their faces really. You can't look into people's eyes. There's the interaction, the back and forth is not necessarily available always. And we know that our students we've seen an increase in depression. And so how do we avenge the gaps for our students? We become the Avengers for them. We become those who come to the rescue, if you will, to make sure that they know that they have a community of support, that they know that while there may be, this may be a hard time right now for them, it will not always be this way. And how can we make it less hard? So let's continue to be those advocates and Avengers for education for our children and for their well-being. We all can be Avengers. And so here are some of the Avengers we should get to know. We usually at the end, people, say, well, here's my name, here's my number, give me a call. But what Marlene and I talked about is like, these are people you really do need to get to know. These are the people you need to get to know on a first name basis. Your student's teacher or teachers, all of them. Get to know your local school principal. Who is this person? Who is actually, if you think about it, kind of like the governor of your school. So who is this person that's giving guidance to your child and to the rest of the school and to the rest of the school? Who is your local school board member? Because that person is elected and elected, by the people, by the community. So that person represents you. And so that person should know who you are. Who are your local school council members? Our local school councils, or if you're in a charter type system, you may have a local school governance committee. Nevertheless, who are those persons? And how do you get to become a member of that council? Did you know that local school council membership is based on elections? Should be a publicly held election. It's not a selection process, it's an election process. Find out who's on your local school council. And then find out who your Title I coordinator is. You may not have one, every school may not have, an individual Title I coordinator. However, there should be someone there who can guide you in how Title I is applied to your student. If you are in a Title I school, if you're in a Title I school, there should be someone there at that school who can help you to understand the supports and resources that Title I requires for your student. And last but certainly not least, we need for you to complete the evaluation, because that is important. This is a process that we have embarked on, and we want to make sure that our communities have information about ESSA, about whatever funding has come down, and that we understand that we can use this plan to make our schools better. So we need your evaluation. We need for you rather to complete the evaluation that will happen at the end of this. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your consideration. And now I'm going to turn it back over so that to Marlene, so that you can see the link that she has placed in the chat.
Wow, that was a lot of information. I so learned a lot. $4 billion, okay? And the schools actually get $3.8 billion. That's a lot of money, and we need to be at the table. And we need to make sure our place is set. And you know how you make sure your place is set? You go there and you sit down and your place is now set. But thank you so much, Pamela. That was so much valuable information. This video will be, I posted some links in the chat. I've also posted them on Facebook, the links that were used in the presentation. So they are available. Please complete the survey. I posted those as well. And I just really, really want us to understand every school system in this state right now is going through the budget, the budget portion of their calendar. And so they have to look at line items. They have to look at where do we put our money. Remember, Pamela said that they have to include you. They have to bring you in and you be included in that. And that's from ESSA, and that's also from ARPA. So they have to post the what they want to do with this, what the plan is for returning to in-person learning, and then they have to take in your feedback, and then you have to push to make sure that it's included, right? Because if it's not watched, it's not checked, right? So just keep in mind we have our advocacy plan laid out for us. We've made a plan, we've written it down, we know what the money is. And so it's now time to get busy and be the Avengers for our children. So thank you for that. Ms. Westbrook, did you have any closing comments you'd like to see? Oh, and this video is going to be available on Facebook for those who participated in the webinar directly. We'll send out the slides. And for others who are watching through Facebook Live or something, please reach out to us. We're happy to share them with you as well. But I'll turn it over to Ms. Westbrook for any closing comments.
I just want to say that I've learned a lot. I took some notes also because what we're just seeing that, you know, this COVID-19 has affected a lot of families, you know, economically also, and especially dealing with the schools. We have a lot of, and it kind of goes hand in hand. You have a lot of parents who have basically had to reduce their hours from work to stay at home, or either quit their jobs to actually stay at home with their children while they are actually learning. And I know, and it was basically a question that I wanted to ask, and you may or you may not know the answer to it, but are there any fundings, and I'm sure it is, for example, parents that are still working that may not be eligible for you know, CAPS, which is daycare, eligible for child care, but because the children are in a school age, that are, there may be different, like the daycare centers that can receive government fundings to help those kids with their schooling in order for the parents to continue to work. So what the monies that they sent, well, do you know whether that was covered in that income? I'm sure it was.
So Pamela, do you want to jump in, or I only know a little? And I know there is funds for childcare. There's a separate line item that is separate from this money. So ARPA has lots of buckets, and I was told that the law is just so dense that you really need to know what you're looking for first and then go in and look for it. And there's probably something there for it. I do know there was a separate line item for child care centers. I don't know what the requirements are for accessing it, if it expands it for people who wouldn't normally qualify, or if, you know, there are other rungs that you have to meet. Pamela, do you have any information about the child care funds?
There are a couple of other provisions. We know that there was the child tax credit, and then there was the child independent care tax credit. So the expansion of the child tax credit included in the ARP as well. And so that's, again, to Marlene's point, we can certainly send out this information, because it gets to be a little convoluted when you're trying to talk through what percent, you know, 35% to 50% what can be claimed, and et cetera, but we'd be more than happy, Ms. Westbrook, to send to you this information on the two pieces where families actually get some support with childcare and dependent care as well, but it's in the form of a tax credit. And we can send out the other line item with some information on the child care funds that are outside of the public school setting. Be more than happy to do that.
And I'm just hoping, you know, just final remarks, I'm just hoping that people are listening, and I'm glad that I actually shared this the flyer on Facebook, on our Facebook page. So hoping that people would register to get the information, because it's so much money that's available out there for different, you know, especially dealing with our education and housing and different things like that. I'm just hoping that the main thing, people have to be educated on what's available. And I'm glad that we have partnered to do this so people will be able to get the information and be educated on what they're basically entitled to. And I want to thank you all so much for your dedicated services and hard work and making sure that people are, continue to be educated and to make sure that our children are be able to receive the entitlement benefits that they need. Thank you all so
Absolutely.
much.
Thank you. And again, just as a big
We got to
number.
do this again. We got to do this
Yeah.
again.
Just as a big number for the early childhood and child care, ARP provided $40 billion for early childhood and child care. So, but that's divvied up in different buckets. And that's what I meant by we can send you that whole, some of it is in a block grant form. So, but we can send you that whole section that talks about early childhood and child care, but it's a total of $40 billion.
Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the partnership always of making DIV NAACP. We really
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things that for those out there, you can follow organizations who are focused on your topic area, and they will be, just like us, doing a continuous deep dive on our issue areas so that we can start to really keep this information flowing and you get more detail with it. So that's always a good way. We will definitely, Ms. Westbrook's point about doing this again. We will be doing this again. And we will continue to dig in deeper to be able to see how systems are spending the money that they're getting. And hopefully in a way that you all, now that you know, are at the table to help direct where it goes. So
Yeah,
thank you for that.
$100 million.
That's right. That's a lot of money.
County.
yeah, because you know that a lot of times people of color does not get equal information. So we just got to make sure that we just keep people educated and what's available for them.
That's right. That's right. Well, does anyone else have any closing remarks for the good of the order? Any other questions, Ms. Westbrook?
No. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. And with that, we will adjourn the workshop. Please check in with Macon Bib NAACP, check in with Gwinnett Stop, and complete the survey. And enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.